Emily Sisson, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing it really good. Let's start off on a lighter note. In my head, I had two different directions. I was like, more serious question or lighter note. We'll start out on the lighter note. As someone who's never been to Rhode Island, it has popped up on my Instagram reels a surprising amount of times. As someone who's never been, what's there to know about the state? Is it underrated? And what are some of your favorite fall things to do in the state of Rhode Island?
I think it's underrated, but it's becoming more discovered. I've always loved Rhode Island. It's beautiful in the fall. The fall is just incredible. The summer is great too. But yeah, the fall here is just, it's my favorite. Fall in Rhode Island is my favorite season. Winter in Arizona is my other favorite season. But fall here is just gorgeous. What's there to note about Rhode Island? Yeah, I don't know. It has like the perfect, or at least Providence kind of has the perfect mix of like city kind of vibes, but also suburbs. Like I don't feel like I'm in like a really busy, crowded city, but there's always something going on. But then you also like it's more affordable, I think, than a lot of East Coast cities are. So I like that it's easy to find a place to rent with a backyard um, or yeah, just kind of feel like you're also somewhat in the suburbs too. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like a really special state. I love it. I've lived here for like 10 years, so I'm biased, but I think it's great.
We were chatting before hitting the record button about your family and how they're spread out all across the US. One day when you end up hanging up the racing shoes, where do you ultimately want to settle? Do you want to stay in Rhode Island? Do you want to
Uh,
explore somewhere else? What's like the dream scenario for Emily Sisson?
that's a really good question, actually, because my husband and I talk about that a lot. So I don't really actually have a hometown. I moved around a lot growing up. So actually, that's like the one easiest question I always struggle with when I get asked on a podcast is where are you from? So I don't actually feel like I'm tied to anywhere. I feel like we could explore like a bunch of different places. I do love the Northeast. I don't love the winters, but I do love everything else about it here. So I could see us staying here. I did like Arizona a lot. It was really far from my family though, so I think that was probably the biggest downside to it. So I don't know. We talk about that quite a bit. I feel like we'll just keep exploring, and eventually, like I do think I'll want to settle somewhere and kind of put roots down because I didn't really have that growing up, and I would like that someday to have just one place that feels like home.
From all of your adventures throughout your life, what's your least favorite city, and the third question would be like a city that surprised you, like a sleeper city that people should visit. Not your favorite, but like it surprised you.
I think I can answer all this except for least favorite because I don't want to don't want to throw any city under the bus. I don't think I've had a horrible experience anywhere.
Go
I
to
think
Detroit or St. Louis then.
I was
I've
gonna
never
say
lived there, but I visited and they're
I
terrible.
actually graduated high school in St. Louis or outside
Really?
St. Louis. Yeah, yeah, Chesterfield, Missouri. I would say favorite place I've lived. Actually, I do think it comes down to either Providence or I guess the whole state of Arizona. I love Arizona. I love like how diverse it is actually in terms of just like weather and like scenery. You can be like in the desert 1 minute and then like an hour and a half later you're in Sedona around like all these beautiful red rocks and then 50 minutes later you're amongst all these like evergreen trees and it's just beautiful and aspens. So it's beautiful. I think Arizona actually might be my favorite, but I do love Rhode Island a lot. City that surprised me when I was in college, my parents actually moved to Pittsburgh, and I didn't know a lot about Pittsburgh. And I remember going to visit them, not really thinking a lot about it, and I was actually really surprised that I kind of pictured maybe more of like I don't know, yeah, just like a lot of factories or something. But I actually thought it was a really cool city. Least favorite, I don't know. I actually went to college. I actually loved the city, but I hated the winters. I hated the winters in Madison, Wisconsin, I think, or Milwaukee. I don't think I've gotten too soft. I can't handle those winters anymore. But I actually love that city all the rest of the year. So I wouldn't say it's my least favorite city, but least favorite season was winter in Wisconsin.
As someone who's lived all over the country, been at different places and different stages of your life and kind of hit every single climate from the
Yeah.
winters in Wisconsin, as you mentioned, to blistering heat in Arizona to Providence, which is probably a good mix of everything. And I'm sure other places that you could mention. Do you feel like that's almost prepared you well for the unique
Yes.
subset of climate that you can get on any given day during race day?
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like I've trained in every element. Humidity, dry heat, cold, wind, everything. So like I remember like I remember my senior year in high school training through the summer in St. Louis, and it was so humid that summer. It was just horrible, and every run just felt like so bad. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to race in conditions worse than this. And I thought I'd never train in conditions either, but I didn't know we'd live in Phoenix someday. But I remember actually when we went to Tokyo or when I went to Tokyo for the Olympics, actually thinking the weather felt kind of similar. It was like really humid and hot, and there were like cicadas everywhere. And I'm like, I could be in like St. Louis for all I know right now because we're like very isolated in our little bubble because it was 2021. And I remember thinking, like, I'm sure like those summers there, like, I'm sure they're still in me somewhere. I'm sure that still paid off. But then anytime there's like a cold race, like I always tell myself, like, I don't like racing in the cold, but like I can do it. Like I feel like I've paid my dues, like training in Wisconsin in the winter and growing up there for like a number of years. So I don't know. I guess that is like I guess the silver lining of moving around a bit is you do get to experience a lot of different climates and elements.
Speaking of the elements and those affecting workouts and training specifically, I think a lot of times a lot of athletes struggle with having a workout on paper and they wake up or they have an afternoon workout and they look at the weather and it's like not ideal. It's either super windy
Yeah,
or, maybe it snows if you're in Wisconsin, or if you're in
yeah.
Arizona, it's super hot, or like Missouri in the summer, super humid. As someone
Mhm.
who's like the best of the best at what you do, so qualified to give advice on this, what advice would you give to the listener in terms of like approaching a workout with bad climate and still trying, like, how do you
Yeah.
adjust that in your mind over the years?
Well, one is just adjusting, like adjusting pace and going off effort. So if it's really humid in the summer, and like I wouldn't push a workout for humidity or heat necessarily. I'd probably just adjust the paces and go effort based. And you actually remember in 2022 going into Chicago Marathon, none of my tempos were actually that great. And we were trying to run I was trying to run sub 220 in the marathon going into Chicago. And I remember that was the one like question mark I had was I'm like, my tempos weren't that good, but they all fell on like the most humid, like hot Rhode Island summer days. And every like for some reason just every tempo in my like 10-day cycle was like a really hot day. But we like kept going off effort and I was getting my legs turning over faster on other days, and it still worked out, even though I wasn't hitting the paces I wanted to hit in my tempo runs. On race day, like I benefited from slowing them down, not forcing the pace, and trying to like hit times to like build confidence and prove fitness to myself. I don't know, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I benefited from slowing things down and just going off effort. And so if it's hot, I would do that. If it's like dangerous conditions like icy or like there's a snowstorm, I'll just push it back a day. Like it's not like one day is not like a big deal. Like yeah, not it's not a big deal at all, especially when you've had like consistent training. So I'd rather not risk like slipping on ice or on snow or like getting stuck in a blizzard and then missing like weeks of training when I could have just easily pushed it back to the afternoon or the morning the next day or something like that. So I know not everyone has that flexibility with work, but if you can push it back a day and the weather looks a lot better in the winter, I'll just do that.
You've had such a long, successful career, which we'll get into. I'm curious, throughout the years of your career, if you go back to yourself in college or high school and you compare your current self to that version, what are some of the biggest ways you feel like you've grown, or ways that you look back to like high school Emily and you're like, I can't believe she did that, or I can't believe she thought that about the sport?
I mean, I guess younger Emily, I've always been really driven from like a young age. And so I've always been really internally motivated. Um, but then there were so many times when I was younger, I felt uh, like I could just be so hard on myself. And so I think like looking back, that's one thing I'd tell like high school Emily or even like college Emily a bit too, like, oh, just don't be so hard on yourself. Just like, like enjoy the process of like learning and growing and improving and as an athlete. Um, and I do think like I did gain a lot of that as I got older and I learned how to handle pressure a lot better and I learned how to really just like savor moments and enjoy little things. But definitely when I was younger, I could be just like incredibly hard, like incredibly hard on myself.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts here, and if you disagree, please do so. It'll maybe make for a more entertaining podcast. How much of you being hard on yourself do you feel like, while not ideal and probably not the best mindset to have, actually drove you to the results you ultimately ended up accomplishing? Because if you look back, you
Yeah.
ran 15:48, which was the national record for high school girls in the 5K in 2007. I think you won the bronze medal at the Pan Am Junior Games. Like, You were a stud back in the day. Do you feel like being hard on yourself pushed you to those results, or do you think you still would have accomplished them if you had a healthier, less expectation and pressure on yourself outlook?
I'm impressed by the research you did. I mean, I think there's a few things to it. I do think a lot of the athletes I'm around and I've surrounded myself with, there is kind of this common, I don't know how to describe it. Like we're always like wanting to improve and wanting to do better. So I do think that's something a lot of athletes can struggle with a bit. But I will say, like, I did have like a really good group of like, I mean, I moved around a lot, so like my friend group would change a bit. But I did surround myself with really like level-headed people, and I would often be like a lot of my friends in high school and growing up weren't runners at all. They like did other sports or they didn't do sports at all. And I think that kind of helped me like gain perspective if I had a bad race, just being like, okay, it's not like it's just running, like it's not like the end of the world. So I think it's a bit of both. Like I think I am like I think being driven did like kind of push me to like I don't know, keep like striving towards big goals, but I think like it can get to like an unhealthy obsessive like extent if you don't put like rein that in and learn how to shut off. Like that's so important in the sport and in anything like that you're doing. Like learning when to like turn work off, like to stop to like shut off from thinking about running or yeah, disconnecting, I think. So I think of, like I don't know if that makes sense, but I think a bit of little bit of both. Like I do think being driven did help, but I think having like people that grounded me and kind of like learning from them, I think I would have burned out if I hadn't. So I think if I just been so driven and hadn't like learned how to shut off better and learn how to like gain a better perspective over the years, like I think I would have quit the sport. So yeah.
How does present day Emily handle the expectations you put on yourself? And are you ever fully satisfied with your race results, or is it constantly trying to achieve the next thing or thinking I could have gone 5 seconds faster? That's the goal next time.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance because I do think I am a lot better at appreciating the big moments now. Like I feel like anytime like something exciting or big happens, I'm always asked what's next, and I'm always like protective of like not being, I don't know, pushed too hard to keep like, I don't know, to get back straight into it. Like if I make a team or set a record, I'm like, hold on a second, like let me just like let's slow down. Like this was the goal for so long, and this was what we were aiming for, and like not like getting complacent. I think like there is this fear amongst athletes that like, oh, if you do stop to enjoy the moment or enjoy like your successes, you're going to be complacent or something. And so I think I am like way better at just like appreciating those moments, especially now, like at this level, you just don't know how many teams you're going to make or like if you're ever going to set a record again or something like that. Um, so like I do think I actually am pretty good at like really taking in and enjoying those moments. But then yeah, like I'm always thinking of what I want to do next. And yeah, so I feel like I feel like I'm at a healthy place, but it is a constant like kind of like balancing the two.
Something I'm so curious to dive into with you, Emily, is if you retired from the sport today and we had a conversation on your career, from today all the way back to when you first got your start in the sport. Objectively, on paper, you're one of the most accomplished U.S. distance runners of all time, specifically in the longer distances, and you've accomplished so much. I'm so curious, like, what keeps you going? I know, like, you're still running crazy times, so like, you've got so much future in the sport. But what's your kind of outlook on what you want to accomplish before hanging up the shoes? Because on paper, like, yes, I know you're still probably chasing after things, but a lot of people who haven't gotten records or made teams, like that's what keeps them in the sport because they're chasing after those things. You've kind of
Yeah.
checked almost every box at this point. Correct me
Oh,
if I'm wrong
thanks.
here.
No, no. I mean, I feel like I don't want my career to end now because I do love it. And I guess that's the answer is I do really enjoy this and I love it. But if something were to happen and like like my career stopped today, like I would be really thankful for um not just like what I was able to accomplish, but the experiences I had at like every level, like high school, college, like as a pro, and then the people I've met. Like, and it's so often like when you look back on things, like you don't realize it at the time, but there's so many small moments like along the way that just end up meaning so much to you as you get older. You look back on like just random like fun moments with your team in college, like on the way to like Big East or something, or I don't know, just like stuff like that. And the people like I've met through the sport are like my best friends, like my husband. Like they're people that like I don't know, they're just really important people in my life. So I am like so thankful for that. But I do want to keep going because I enjoy it. I don't feel like I have anything to lose, which is kind of nice and kind of liberating. Like it allows me to take like chances on things, and it sucks when like the risks I take don't work out and like I fail or something. But I do feel like I have like room to just like try what I want to try because there's nothing really to lose. I'm thankful for the career I've had, but yeah, I do just at the end of the day enjoy it, and that's I think what's allowed me to have such longevity in the sport. I don't think it comes down to just one thing, but I think that's like like one of the most important aspects is just keeping it fun and like enjoying it. Because as soon as that goes away, as soon as I stop having fun, then that's when everything else just goes.
I think something that a lot of professional, just top runners at every level in the sport, that the average person doesn't appreciate is just how much hard work, dedication, you can fill that in a million times, goes into, the things you've accomplished. And a lot of times they'll just boil it down to talent or
Yeah,
basically themselves not, putting in the work that you have to get to where you are. To a younger listener out there, like I always hear, and I'm always want to be supportive of people like, oh, I want to make the Olympic Games. But the other part of me is like, I want to sit you down and show you what Olympians actually have done to get to that point. How much hard work, dedication, sacrifice, whatever you want to talk about, has gone into the American records you've run, the Olympic teams you've made, the all the titles throughout the years.
uh, so much. Yeah, I mean, like I'm thankful. Like my husband's been like able to go all in on this goal with me because I don't think I would have been able to do this so like solo. And it's an interesting setup being a professional runner if you're not like part of a team. So much of it is like finding people that are willing to work with you and then kind of um, yeah, leaning on them a lot. But it's not like yeah, it's not like I have like a whole team structure. So yeah, a lot of it is like choosing where we're going to go do training camps, going across the country to avoid the winter so that I can get a really good uninterrupted training block in before the trials or like it sucks when you have to like miss holidays or birthdays or weddings, but like that's part of it. And it's my least favorite part of the job is like when there's like a birthday or something, or like a wedding I can't go to because I'm racing or I have like a really important race like the trials or something in a couple of weeks. So like it does like to me that is a sacrifice. I hear some people refer to that as like lifestyle choices, but it does feel like you're giving up a bit. Um, but then when I'm like not in season, then I do try to make time and try to go to all the weddings and try to do all the things I can't when I'm getting ready for a really big race. So it does take a lot of sacrifice and like intentional decision making on our end. But I do think also just going back to like, oh, when you say you talk to someone that's like, oh, I want to like do this big thing or I want to go to the Olympics, I think something that helped me growing up was actually, or like growing up through the sport was kind of just always like taking it one step at a time. Like in high school, I wanted to qualify for Foot Locker. Like that was like the big thing. It's like, or just something like that. I don't know. Um, or like in college, like I wanted to be all American first, and then I wanted to try eventually to like win an NCAA title, and then as a pro, I wanted to like it was just always like steps. I don't know if this makes sense, but kind of always focusing on whatever the next step is, and not thinking like 5 steps ahead is what I think has helped me a lot. Um, and then and yeah, just focusing on like what the next goal is. How can you improve a little bit to get to that next checkpoint or that next I don't know that next like plateau almost where you're going to be next. I think that's helped me.
Yeah, that's so good. Coach Miltenberg from University of North Carolina shared this framework with me that he shares with his team that goes right to what you're talking about. He frames it as the next logical step. So he'll talk with
Yeah,
his athletes. They'll have a big goal and he'll say, what's the next logical step? Generally, it's practice that day, the next workout, or maybe
yep,
they want
yep,
to go, 3:35 in the 15, but they're at 3:42. It's like, okay, let's break 3:40 first. Because if you're
exactly.
only
Yeah,
chasing after 3:35, maybe a 3:39 is actually a big disappointment, despite it being
yeah,
a 3-second PR. But if you take
yeah,
that next logical step
exactly.
mindset, you just ride that all the way to the top.
Yeah, I refer to it as being like task oriented. It's the same thing as being process oriented, but thinking of the next task. But then almost like flipping that a bit. I was talking to someone actually just a couple days ago at New Balance. The nice thing of not having like limits too. Like actually, this is kind of changing subject, but
Go
I
for
was
it.
talking to someone about going into Chicago a couple of years ago when I was trying to break 220. And I remember like we were really focused on every step along the way of that build of just getting as fit as I could. We weren't actually thinking of a time. Like the whole build up, we never really talked about times. And even though like we knew like if everything aligned, it could be an American record attempt. We were really just like, let's see how fit I can get in 3 months. And I think if I actually had been so focused on like this one time, one, it just sounded like scary and overwhelming, running like 219. But then also like I wouldn't have even thought about running 218. Like I would have just like, I don't know if that makes sense. Um, yeah, just I think it's good just to think in terms of steps along the way because then you can just like it allows your body just to like show you what it can do as opposed to you just trying to force something. I don't know.
What's fascinating about you saying that, Emily, is Coach Smith, NAU. I'm just dropping all the coaches' names at this point, but
Yeah.
you're going to be a future coach at this point. All your lessons are lining up with theirs. This was crazy to me. Him and Cornfield both told me this, that they've won 6 of the last 7 team championships on the men's side. And apparently not once during the build up to the championship did they talk about winning a championship.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like
I
shocked. I was
I
shocked.
believe that. Yep, yep. Before I set the American record, not once did we talk about it. And actually, my husband made a really big point of that when he would talk to my coach. He'd be like, "There's no talking about it. We're just focusing on tasks." And when our team won NCAA's in college, there was no talk about that either because we were trying to get everyone just as fit and healthy as we could. So I believe that completely. It's interesting. You'd think that's something you talk and think about all the time, but actually, it's not. You're just if you're focusing on like the next logical step, like you said. Um, yeah, it kind of centers you and I'm not surprised that's how they do it either.
You've mentioned your husband, Shane, a few times in this conversation.
Yeah.
And I know he is so helpful within these training blocks, just in life in general. What are those moments like when you cross the finish line? Generally, it's like kicking ass in some sort, whether it's winning a title, making a team, or setting a record. What are those moments, crossing the finish line with him like, where it's the culmination of months and years of hard work with each other?
It's awesome. I have a very like small support team, but like everyone in it is just so involved and they care so much. I can tell, and I'm just so thankful for that. Like it's a very small circle, but everyone's just like so in it with me, I feel like. So it means the world. Whenever I cross the finish line at first, I'm usually just so tired. Like I'm not actually, I never have the best finish line photos because everyone else is like smiling and I'm just like, I just look like happy to be done. But then like 30 seconds later, I feel like everything kind of sinks in. I'm like slow to process things usually. And then yeah, those moments are always just the best. And I'm, yeah, just so thankful for that.
One of the things I made a mental note to bring up with you, just following you throughout the years of being a fan of the sport, a key attribute of Emily Sisson is, I would phrase it as grit. You might have another word for it, where just anytime you race, you can assume as a viewer that you're going to go to the well and then some and give 101% of what you can on the day. I think one of the biggest memories for me is watching the 2020 U.S. Olympic trials on the track in 2021 because of COVID. That 10K, how it unfolded, I'm sure many people know what I'm talking about, where you're just so gutsy, go to the front, like just push the pace. And I feel like there are many examples of that throughout the years where you've just like made races intentionally hard for yourself because a race is that. It's like, exploring how much you can get out of your human potential. Take me through where you think this grit has come from. Do you think it's innate? Do you think you've built it up throughout the years through training? And can you just kind of speak to your grittiness as a racer?
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I do think I like to just really like try to get everything out of myself. And there's sometimes I'm like, maybe I should just hold back and, and just like, uh, in some races and just like sit and then pick it up maybe later on. But I don't know. I just like that style. And there's other racers I love racing because I know they have similar styles. Like I think Wayne has a very similar style to me, or like and Ailish McColgan. Like I think they have that kind of style as well. But yeah, I thanks. I'm really proud of the trials and but I know it's weird to call it 2020 or 2021 because I think
Right.
it was technically the 2020 Olympics. But I do remember feeling like I was in a much better headspace going into that trials than I was the marathon trials. And I was definitely nervous, but like I felt very at peace too with like all the work I'd done going into that race. And like I knew I did everything I could and I made all the best decisions. I made every decision the best I could along the way. And I just remember like standing on the start line being like, I'm just going to give it everything I have. And I hope that's enough to make the team. And if it's not, I'm just going to make everyone work for it because this is going to be a grind. and, and like, there's going to have to be like, with how good distance running is right now in the US, like that's all you can do. Get yourself as prepared as you can and run as hard as you can. If there's three people better than you on the day, they're just better than you on the day. And like, and then you go try again for the next team or the next race. And that's actually like my favorite part of the sport is like, if you do fail or something doesn't work out or like you just get sick or injured or whatever, like there's something always just around the corner, at least as a distance runner there is. Maybe track athletes don't feel the same way, but like I can just hop on the roads. I can do like fall road racing or like even like winter road racing. So there's always something for me. So I feel like that helps. But thanks. Yeah, I loved that race. It was definitely hard, but I was proud of that one.
For summoning the grit and toughness within these races, is that something that you feel like you've developed within training? So then when you race, it's like not a new thing, or is this just something that you
Yeah.
unlock on race day? Because from what I've read in regards to your training, it's generally, I would say, pretty conservative in terms of you're not going to the well too often. So how do you like summon these monumental efforts a few times a year?
Yeah, I don't really go to the well in training. I don't try to like prove fitness really ever or like race my workouts. Like sometimes I see pictures of people like on the ground after a workout, like exhausted, and I'm always like, oh no, I don't know if I train hard enough because I don't do that. But I do think there's just different ways to train, and like and maybe this is just what works best for me. I had like a lot of injuries when I was younger and high school and college, and I just think for my longevity, even though I'm sure like there's a big purpose to doing these like hard efforts every now and then for other athletes, this just probably works best for me. So I don't know. I think probably just racing over the years, I developed it, or I used to do a lot of workouts on my own. I do think you kind of learn how to just like grind things out solo if it's like a windy day or if it's not good weather, or if you're up at 5 in the morning to beat the heat in Phoenix or even earlier than that. I do think that helps kind of maybe kind of help with that grit, I suppose. It's just like, yeah, it just like having to get up and go outside when you don't want to because it's really cold out or it's 4:30 in Phoenix or something like that. So I do think that probably helps. Yeah, everyone gets. I feel like everyone in like the winter in the U.S. always gets so much respect for being gritty, but I have so much respect for people that grew up in Phoenix, like Jess McLean, or like anyone that trains there that's up at like 4 in the morning because I am not a morning person, and that was honestly that was so hard some days.
You mentioned earlier on in your response there, seeing photos of people after workouts laid out on the ground and having the thought like, oh, maybe I'm not working hard enough.
Yeah.
It made me think of social media, and I brought up the race, back in 2007, where basically you've been successful for a while, and you were successful before social media was really even a thing. Instagram was released, I think, October 6, 2010. So that bronze medal was 3 years before Instagram. Like you didn't even have the chance to post, I won a
Mhm.
bronze medal. Present day, like everything is out there in terms of training, pictures, like it's just all out there.
Yeah.
As someone who is an athlete and a high level athlete before social media was really a thing and now is also a high level athlete
Yeah.
after, what's kind of your perspective on social media and how it's affected the sport?
It's definitely changed. I feel like now, the things I struggle with social media aren't necessarily what I struggled with a few years ago. I do feel content in like the type of training I do and knowing like what works best for me and not getting stuck into comparison traps now. But I didn't feel that way maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. So like I used to actually before like big races going into like I don't know maybe the Olympic trials in 2016 or 2020, like I would either just like not go on social media or I'd mute every single running account I followed so that I just couldn't see anything, kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And now I don't need to do that. Now I feel like I know just like everyone has like different ways of training that works for them, especially as a marathoner. Like it's amazing the different types of training you can do and have success. Like it's so I actually find it fascinating when I was talking to different people about how they train. Like I love talking to like Molly Seidel or like Kira D'Amato because I find their training so fascinating because it's just so different. But that doesn't mean that I necessarily think like I should try that. I just think it's interesting how like people can train so differently and still have like so much success. So I think now I feel like content, like we found probably what works best for me. And I have a lot of faith in that and my coach. I'm still open minded to like different things, like maybe adding a cross training someday or things like that. But I think that just kind of came over time and getting older and maybe like getting into my mid 30s now. But I used to just like probably mute accounts going into big races because I'm like, I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to see it. I just want to go on Instagram and see pictures of dogs or people like decorating cakes or something. I don't know.
Something I'm curious to hear about, and I always love talking about with people of your caliber, is just like the lessons you've accrued over the years. So if you want to think through this question, go for it.
Okay.
Every stage of your career, I think you started running in seventh grade, so we'll eliminate middle school out of
Yeah.
this. Let's go high school, college, professional running. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in each of those stages?
Um, hmm. I think when I was younger, in high school, I kind of just learned being patient. Like I think I did struggle with comparisons when I was younger in high school, and I'd see people like having a lot of success really quickly, and like I'd feel like, oh, maybe I'm not doing something right because I was pretty low mileage in high school, and I'm like, well, maybe I should be doing this like crazy high mileage or doing all this extra stuff. Um, but like it didn't feel right, and I always had like coaches that were really very much thinking like long term for me. So I think like patience, kind of trusting that you're on your own journey was something that was instilled in me when I was younger and not to compare my journey to someone else's. And then also in high school, just keeping it fun. Actually, just always keep it fun throughout every level. But maybe that in high school. In college, like that's when I really felt like I started making so many like great friends and like not that I didn't in high school, I just moved around a lot. So I had three different high schools. So in college, I feel like I started really appreciating like the relationships I was developing and forming through the sport. So kind of like appreciating that part of the sport while still developing as an athlete. Kind of yeah, I think that was probably my biggest lesson in college was just like how much the sport had to offer me outside of just like big goals, as cheesy as that sounds. And then as a pro, I'd say my biggest lesson was just be open to learning and be open to like surrounding yourself with people better than you. Um, and that's what you want to, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to surround myself with people much smarter, much better than me, so that I could like pick their brains or not even just like ask them a bunch of questions, but just see how they do things, how they handle themselves. And I think that helped me grow a lot was just surrounding myself with people much better, much smarter than me, and kind of treating it like any other job where I'm just trying to learn as much as I can to just improve myself. And yeah, so I think that touched every level.
Absolutely. Something that blew my mind is that, and you either are one of one or one of incredibly few people to do this. You qualified for the Foot Locker National Cross Country Championships all 4 years of high school, which is just
Yeah.
mind blowing. Like, I read that and I want to retire from running. Um, and then in college, you were a two-time NCAA champion, if I'm not mistaken. And then as a pro, we've talked
Yeah.
about a lot of the accomplishments. So you've been so consistently successful at every single level. And I think that's like increasingly rare to see as someone who gets it done at every level. What would you attribute that consistent success to throughout the years?
Part of it is just I've always like kind of back to that internal drive. I've always really enjoyed the sport and I've always been driven. I think that was a big part of me. Like I wasn't running. I think it's easy when you're younger to run for like validation, like to be told like maybe like validation from like, I don't know, that sounds horrible, but like a parent or a coach or something. But I think there's something to it. And I think I always just really myself enjoyed the sport from a young age. I tried to like be patient. I think that was really important. Like not like just knowing like I want to be running for like a long time. And so not to like take any shortcuts, just to like trust in the process and my journey. And just like, I think that has helped along the way. And then keeping in perspective, um, I think that's actually a huge part of it, just like the perspective piece, because I do think like burnout can be a huge issue, especially if you're like really driven to the point where like it becomes an obsession or it becomes like not healthy early on. So I think having perspective, like surrounding myself with people, like shutting my brain off when I'm not working. Um, yeah, like when I'm working, I'm like all like I'm really focused and I'm like very much like task at hand. But then when I'm not working, I'm actually really good at shutting off. And I think that's a huge part of it. Like enjoying like like being around friends and talking about other interests and things, I think is really important to keep that perspective. Like at the end of the day, it is just running. And it's important, like it matters a lot to me, but it's not everything. So I'm sure, yeah. And then just like physically, I think not breaking down. Like I think I was very always like because I moved around so much, I think it was like a silver lining. Every coach I had in high school was very conservative with my training because no one wanted to change it too much. So I was very everyone was just kind of low mileage. I did cross train quite a bit in high school, actually, like 2 days a week instead of running. Or at least I think that's quite a bit. And yeah, so I think like I had like a very steady progression with coaches that were very much like invested in long-term development. So I don't know. I think there's a lot that goes into it. Keeping it fun though, that like it has to be fun. It's because it is hard work. Some days it's really hard and like you need to be like excited about what you're doing and love what you do. Maybe not 24/7 all the time, but like at the end of the day, it needs to stay fun.
In the current landscape of professional runners, and I think a lot of times this is positive and it makes sense for majority of people to do, is to change coaches, change groups, change sponsors. Something I'm fascinated by with you, correct me if I'm wrong here, is you've had the same coach, Tracey, and the same sponsor, New Balance, since turning professional in 2015. How
Yeah.
much do you feel like that has benefited you in terms of like a, you know, yeah, when people change a group and they'll admit it, like the training changes, the setup
Yeah.
changes, a lot of times they move. How much do you feel like that's contributed to your success throughout the years?
I mean, I think Ray's training just is a really good fit for me. And so I haven't really ever thought like, oh, I need to switch something up because I think like I do trust his training and his knowledge. I give him feedback if something I feel like isn't working or if I don't feel like something's quite right, and he's open to it and he's listening to it. And he even said he learns along with me every time I do a marathon. We're both learning, so I think that's awesome. But it's funny. I remember when I was transferring colleges after my freshman year, I narrowed it down to Ray and one other coach, and they both had like a history of just like one thing that impressed me was like at the time how many athletes they had coached to like break 15 or how many women they'd coached to break 15 minutes in the 5K because that used to be like huge a huge deal, and like how many Olympians they'd coach and how much success they'd had with multiple athletes over like their whole careers, not just in college. And I talked to Ray and another coach. I thought they both sounded really knowledgeable. And I remember talking to Ray on the phone though, and he's Irish, so his accent to me sounded really thick. And it's funny now that I'm surrounded by a lot of other Irish, I'm like, he doesn't have a thick accent. But anyway, I couldn't understand what he was saying. Like I got like, I don't know, like 50% of what he was saying on the phone. But the 50% I heard, I was like, I just feel like his training is going to be a really good fit for me. And it really was. And to this day, like I really enjoy working with him. I think he knows so much about the sport. He's very like very intuitive. I sometimes think I don't even know if he can explain the things he like understands, but I like working with him. I like that he's like open minded to like hearing my feedback on things too. So yeah, I think like, and he just knows me so well now after working together for like however many years, 2011, I think I came to Providence. So yeah, long time.
A lot of people talk about, you know, it being very helpful and crucial a lot of times to have like a why in sport, why you do something, why you do
Yeah.
something in life. For you, what was your why when you first started running? And how does that shape up and compare to October 23, 2024? Why?
uh, my why, I thought it was really fun. Like I really enjoyed it. I loved, I don't know, I just liked like moving my body and pushing myself. And I did other sports growing up too. I did soccer. I was really into soccer and did other sports. Um, but yeah, it's funny. I actually enjoyed running so much. Like I told my parents like when I was in middle school, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna quit soccer because I just want to run. Like I love it. And that like they were pretty hands off, to be fair, which I think was really helpful in like growing and learning as an athlete. Like they often were like very much just like let me make my decisions, but they did. I remember my dad saying like that was the one time he like inserted his opinion. He's like, "Oh, I think that's a mistake. I don't think you should give up soccer yet." And he's like, and I just remember being like, "Why?" Like I just like running. I really like it. And he was like, "No, I think you're just so young. Like you're so in like you have like the rest of your life if you just want to focus on running. But like right now, like enjoy like playing sports, like playing a team sport with your friends." And I think he could see like the talent when I was young. And so I think part of him was like, oh, this will actually like part of it's probably like this is good for her as a developing athlete, but I think there was also like a social component. I think he was like, she's very shy. I think playing team sports is actually going to be really good for her. So they didn't like force me to keep playing soccer, but they were like, we just think like, just you're so young, like don't focus on one sport just now. And I'm thankful they said that.
For you, how much has your why changed throughout the years, or do you feel like it's stayed pretty steady and true to that OG middle school Emily why?
Yeah, I still really enjoy it, and that's why I do it. But no, like there are definitely times where like, especially now that it's my job, like it can get kind of like muddied or something. Like if there's like an Olympics on the line or things like that, sometimes it can get like a little like that's when like it's easy to lose sight of it when you're like, oh, like there's something I feel like I have to do or I really, really want to do. And so I do think like going back to that like task focus, process focus helps like pull me out of that because like I feel like that can I mean, it's good to have big goals that excite you and get you out of bed. But if you feel like you have to do something, or if I feel like I have to do something, or if there's something I just need to do, that's when I start to lose sight of that. And that's when things can become a little less fun. So I do try to keep that at the core of it all the time is uh, remembering why I do it. And yeah, I think that's kind of how I have to be in order to keep having success and to keep staying in the sport without burning out, really.
Talking about 2025 and your vision for it, all the lessons and learnings from, your successful, gosh, it'll be 10 years of being a professional runner at that point going into next year. What's your ambition and vision for next year? It doesn't even have to be from an outcome standpoint, but just things you want to approach the year with.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that 2025 is the year after an Olympic year. So the last like year and a half of my life has been so like planned out and so structured because everything was working back from the Olympics and the Olympic trials, even like as far back as like last spring. We were making decisions like in 2023, early 2023 about what fall marathon I wanted to do, what would set me up well going into the trials and going into the Olympics. And so oftentimes like when you have such a rigid structure, sometimes I don't feel like with something so big on the line, like taking a risk and going overseas or going to Australia or something to try to run a fast half. So I think I kind of want to do stuff like that now. I want to do things that like I didn't want to do during like the Olympic year. So I think like maybe focusing more on shorter distances and maybe traveling a bit more just to like switch things up. I think that also keeps the sport fun is like trying different races or training at different locations. So I think I might do that. I think I might focus on some shorter distances. I don't even know if I want to focus on like running really fast in the half or if I want to just like I know there's like the world half champs next year. So maybe I'll try I think we have our like selection in Atlanta in March. I think that's what I've been hearing anyway. So maybe I'll do that. And then I'll probably focus on like a fall marathon later in the year. But it's kind of nice right now. I'm like, oh, I can do like I get to choose what I want to do now, and I can be very flexible. I don't have to work back from something. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
You'll have to correct me because you'll know here, and I'm looking for it right now. You might have it. Or maybe Kira has it. You'll know when I ask the question. I know you came 1 second off of the American
Yeah,
record and the half. How much is that if you don't hold it? How much is that on your brain to attack it?
you,
Redemption.
I did end up breaking it two times after that,
Okay. Okay.
but Wayne currently holds it. That one's still going to keep falling. Like it just, yeah. I mean, all the records right now are falling, but I just think
You
like
still
it's
held the
easier to
marathon though,
hop in a
right?
half. Yeah,
From
marathon. Yeah.
2022. What's the
But
perspective on that? Do you think you
oh
can
yeah,
keep hammering that down, or is that like
yeah.
2022 Chicago was the day?
I definitely feel like a lot of things did line up on that day. And the marathon, it is like you need a lot of things to come in line. Is with the half, like if something doesn't come in line, you can just go do another half like a month later or so. But I think there are a lot of people kind of running faster in the marathon, and I could definitely see getting pulled to that or like being part of a group that's trying to lower it. But I don't even know if that's what I want to necessarily do next is try to lower the marathon record. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But back to the 1 second off. Yeah, that was horrible. That was yeah, that was over in Spain. Um, and the whole flight back, I remember like thinking of like ways I could have saved or like made up a second. Like I remember getting to like a roundabout in the race and not knowing which. It was a huge roundabout, and I didn't know which direction to run. And I kind of like slowed down to a stop trying to figure out which way to go. And I'm like, that was my second, like things like that. So that was a long plane ride back. But for the marathon, I mean, I do want to keep improving and running faster. And but I also just want to be more competitive. And there's so many marathons I haven't run yet that I'd like to run that aren't necessarily fast marathons. So, but I don't know. But like then again, it would be nice to lower the record or try to lower it before someone else lowers it. But or in a race or someone else is trying. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess that's a nice thing is like there's so many different goals you can set and things you can I like put your like sights towards. But I just don't know yet what exactly is like kind of calling me to try to do.
A lot of people, including myself, as proof a question ago, ask questions about time, records, making teams. Do you ever get to just run and feel free, or do you feel like you're always like chasing after something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the nice parts of maybe focusing on shorter distances for the next like few months. I do feel like every marathon I've done the past three, there's been something huge on the line. And I kind of do just like running just for the sake of it sometimes and just being like, okay, let's see what I can do today without there being an Olympics on the line or an Olympic team on the line or an American record. And I did try to like kind of carry that casual attitude going into Chicago last fall because I knew the next two marathons I were doing were going to be like really big and blown up and put on a pedestal. So I do think it is kind of fun just hopping in races sometimes and not having like a very clear like idea of what's going to be considered good for the day and what's going to be considered like not good, like what you'd be happy with. So like I remember going to the trials, it just felt so pass fail. Like it's so like and in a lot of other races it doesn't feel that way. You can like there are things you can learn, there are things you can be happy with or take away from, but like going into the trials, it's like three people walk away making the team. So it is very binary.
Emily, final serious question for you today. Let's say a freshman in high school listening looks up to you, your career, is knowledgeable about all that you've accomplished. What would be words of advice to that person who wants to be great at the sport? What would you say to them in terms of what that pursuit looks like and how to get there?
Um, I think I'd say, I guess a lot of stuff we've already touched on. Like, don't compare your journey with someone else's. Like, do you like, I don't know, do you recognize everyone has like a different path in this sport and kind of just be open to learning what works for you, what you enjoy doing. Like everyone's different. So trying your best. It's harder, I think, in high school to not fall into like comparison traps, but like trying to avoid that as much as you can. Trying to find like try to enjoy like the moments like with your team. Like as you get older, especially when you're a professional, you don't really have the team atmosphere anymore. That is something I definitely miss. So like enjoy all those little moments. Enjoy like the big moments along the way. And I don't know, just be open to learning. I guess I think that I try to fit a lot into that answer, but be open to learning. Be open to learning what works for you. Um, Try not to compare and just yeah, just enjoy it. Like I think like there's so many times I look back on things and I feel like in the moment I didn't like not that I didn't appreciate it, but I'm just like wow that was really cool. Like the teammates I had or like these like small moments. Yeah, you appreciate them as you get older. So just try to enjoy that as much as you can.
All great stuff, Emily. Final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single episode. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Oh God, I'd probably have to order something and say I made it. I'm not a good cook.
You're not the chef in the
uh,
home?
no, I am trying to get more into cooking. Yeah, no. Oh God, that actually would
Hey,
stress
you
me out.
perform well under pressure. What would be the like, you
What's
know,
easy? What can you
one in
like
a million
not
shot, even if you don't nail it most of the time? Like, what would be your shoot for the stars meal that you'd try to make him?
for Gordon Ramsay? I don't know. I just feel like I'd make something easy like spaghetti bolognese or something because I feel like you can't really mess that one up. Like that's if I say that, I don't know. He'd probably find a way you could mess it up. And I like pasta. I'm a runner, so I'd do that.
I love it. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Ever since I started
Yeah.
following the sport, I feel like I've looked up to you and always enjoyed following your career. So it's a privilege to get to sit down with you and pick your brain on subjects relating to running and excellence. So really appreciate you taking the time and can't wait to see all the things you'll accomplish in the
Oh,
coming
thank
months and
you.
years.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for all the good, thoughtful questions.